Good evening. God bless you. Welcome back to another segment of Let's Talk. Thank you for joining us. I am Minister Kathy Mathews, and I am filling in for Pastor Connie, who is off enjoying a well deserved vacation. And I pray that she is getting the rest and just enjoying the beach. That is her sweet spot. So I'm praying that she's having the best of times. Tonight, we're going to be continuing in our series on journeys. Each week, we have featured guests who have accomplished a goal that they waited a very long time or far longer than they anticipated to achieve. And they've been sharing their stories about how God helped them to navigate through some pretty tough terrains, but managed to persevere and continue to pursue their goals and get a victory. And tonight, the guest that is going to be joining us is going to be sharing her journey about a topic that affects a lot of couples, and it's infertility. And it's not a topic that's talked about a lot in the church community, which is rather ironic given the fact that infertility, is as old as time. I mean, even when you look back in biblical days, in the Bible, since the beginning, women like Sarah and Elizabeth, who were infertile the better part of their lives into old age, even, and waited until they were well seasoned and beyond childbearing years to have babies. You think about Hannah, who had to watch her husband take on another wife because of her inability to conceive. And so we talk about these women from the Bible and how long they had to wait, but we don't specifically link it to infertility and what that must have felt like to, be in an environment where, what it was perceived that women were supposed to do was conceive and bear children, that you weren't able to do that. I would imagine that, being infertile brings a lot of psychological and interpersonal relationship issues because you get married hoping, to start a family, wanting to have children, and no one could have perceived on the front end of it that it would be something that would be difficult. And so, because our live is called Let's Talk, we're here tonight to talk about it. So, what is infertility? Well, it's the inability to be pregnant even after having frequent unprotected sex for 1 year or more. 15% of couples will have trouble conceiving, according to UCLA Health. Globally, 48.5 million couples experience infertility or infertility complications. And it can cause, as I said before, it can cause psychological, interpersonal distress that can negatively impact the quality of life. In fact, infertility is cited as one of the most primary causes for divorce among couples. Nearly 41% of infertile women have issues with depression. Almost 87% have anxiety. Nearly 2% of live births in the US are as a result of assisted reproductive technology. And the average parent goes through at least 2 cycles of IVF before having success. And it can be costly. It can range anywhere between $40,000 to $60,000 or beyond, depending on how many times you've tried and what your other particular issues surrounding your inability to conceive are. Some of the possible causes of infertility can be um, ovulation, fallopian tube damage, fibroids, endometriosis. Some women have had cancer or early menopause. In men, it's often caused by the improper working of the testicle or the sperm count. And then often, when couples have exhausted all of their options, many decide to adopt. But the gamut goes from one extreme to the other, and the outcomes are as individual as the people who have to endure them. And uh, the experiences that they face are all varied. And tonight we are very grateful to have with us Zarah Bailey, who is going to come on and share with us her testimony of her journey. So let's bring her on now. Good evening. You're on mute. All right, there we go.
Nope, I'm on mute.
Now you are. I can
I'm
hear you good.
ready.
All right, good evening. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good.
Good. Thank you
I
for.
was just trying to share the broadcast on my Facebook page, and yeah.
um, Thank you for joining us this evening. Would you just take a few minutes and introduce yourself to our viewers?
Sure, no problem. First of all, my name is Zarah Bailey. I am the wife of Dr. Robert Bailey of Greater New Hope Church, and I am the mother of one beautiful little girl by the name of Zarah Bailey. My husband and I have been married for 19 years. We dated off and on for three, and then after that 3 years of trying to figure out what we want to do, we got married, and we've been together for 19 years. Um, I have a average 9 to 5 job, but I do love my family. I love being at my church. I'm very active at my church because my husband is, like I said, the pastor of the church. So I'm very active in the church. I love the women's ministry, which I'm the ministry leader of. Um, I just I love to travel, and I basically love life. I'm a pretty optimistic person. I try to stay optimistic, and I do like sharing my story because you never know who needs to hear it. And I'm about in impacting and empowering and lifting up women, not just women that are in a similar situation that I was in, but just women in general. I love trying to build up people's self-esteem. I love trying to encourage women to go out and reach what God's will is for them. And so that's me in a nutshell. I'm goofy, uh, smart, love God, blessed, saved, all of those things.
That's beautiful. That is beautiful. So we have you on tonight because we're in our series talking about journeys.
Yes,
And
ma'am.
tonight, as you heard in our opening, we were wanting you to share your journey about being infertile and having issues with conceiving. And so tell us a bit about that. What was the start of that? How did you know that you were having issues with just normal conceiving?
Well, we tried to start having a family. At first, my husband and I were talking about marriage. He was really adamant about not having children. And so even we talked about it. We were honest with one another. I said I wanted one, a couple. He said he didn't want any children, but we talked about it, and I decided I love this man. I'm going to marry him anyway, and we'll go from there. Well, 2 weeks into the marriage, he decides, you know what? I do want to have a child. Because what was happening is some things that happened in his prior relationship affected how he looked at his current relationship with me, which happens to a lot of us.
Yes.
So he had to let go of that baggage, and I had to let go of my trust issues. And we worked together and decided, okay, let's do this. So after a month of marriage, we decided, we're going to try to consider having a baby. And now we were all happy, all optimistic. After a year, nothing happened. And I thought maybe because I had, maybe because I was, my body was trying to get used to the fact that I was married now and all this I was just making up all kind of excuses. And then after year two, it was like, okay, something is not right. And at the time, I was only about 31. So I wasn't very old. So I didn't understand what was going on because, everybody else was getting, pregnant left and right. And so I was like, what's going on with me? Why am I not accomplishing that? And so we figured out something might be wrong then.
And so you guys, after the 2 weeks when he decided he wanted to, you guys began trying immediately.
Yes, ma'am, we did. We
see.
tried. Yeah, and it's like I said, I tried to, look into, I'm a research person. I love to research. And so I researched about, what's healthy for the body and what should go in, what should you invest in as far as eating right and those kind of things. So I was trying to get my body ready for a child. And I knew I wasn't in my 20s anymore, but I knew that I wasn't that old. So I was trying to figure out what did I need to do to kind of get this happening, to make this work. And so that's why I kind of took a little bit of time for us to realize, okay, something's not lining up. Yeah. So, and we just figured, first year of marriage or so, maybe you're kind of busy or maybe we were thinking about it too much. And we kind of just settled down with all the thinking. And like people say, just let it happen. Yeah, so we were trying to let it happen, but it didn't happen. Yeah. And so that's when we kind of, yeah.
So at what point on the journey did you start to seek professional help about what was going on?
Well, after the first couple of years, it was year 3 that I went to my gynecologist and we discussed it and everything. The first thing he did is he put me on some medicine called Clomid. And it's supposed to create, fertility and create and stimulate ovulation and all that. And so I was taking that for about 6 months with no luck, no success. And so I'm like, okay, what is going on? I, kind of started getting a little discouraged at that point because I just assumed I wouldn't have any problems. And I took the Clomid for a little while. It wasn't working. And so he suggested I go to a hormone specialist. And I went to the hormone specialist. His name was Dr. Rodriguez, a very nice, kind man. And what he did is he looked at me, did an exam, a consultation. He noticed that I had facial hair. I didn't have a full beard, but you know how some women can have, I always had sideburns. But, he noticed that my sideburns are a little thick and stuff like that, little things like that. I'm serious. And also I had weight gain and I couldn't lose. I tried everything, couldn't lose weight. So what he did is he gave me a glucose test. And when I did the glucose test, I found out that this was like the last thing that kind of determined I had PCOS, which is polycystic ovarian syndrome. And I was insulin resistant. My body didn't break down insulin readily. I wasn't diabetic, but I had a hard time breaking down insulin. And those were symptoms, all symptoms of PCOS. Another symptom or side effect of PCOS. PCOS also causes infertility. It makes it real hard for women to have children. And
Mm-hmm.
so I was hopeful after, about 3 years I was hopeful that, okay, this is going to fix it.
Yeah.
Immediately, once I started taking, he put me on metformin, which is normally a diabetic medicine, but it's also used for PCOS to help to break down insulin and everything and help kind of promote and get that under control. And
Mm-hmm.
once I started taking that, I immediately started losing weight. Other things started kind of, my face, I was producing higher levels of testosterone
Mm-hmm.
and started leveling that out. I started kind of getting a little softer as far as, my emotions.
Mm-hmm.
I was like a no nonsense kind of person. And my nurturing side wasn't so prominent, but after I started kind of leveling off, my hormones were leveling off. I was more toward the genteel side of my personality, and it started working for me. And so I'm thinking, okay, this is going to be it. We're going to have a baby. Yay. Still nothing. So Clomid didn't work. Finding out I have PCOS, which is a lot of women's problems with infertility, got that under control, still had problems. So after about a year of taking the metformin, I started getting to, they started deciding to, let's do an ultrasound of your abdomen, your womb, so we can kind of see if you have any eggs, if you're any eggs are growing healthily, what's going on. So what I did is they did an ultrasound. After they did the ultrasound, they found out that there was a mass on my ovaries. So of course, when you tell someone there's a mass, the first thing you thinking, I'm thinking, is ovarian cancer. I got, I'm keep in mind, I love God. I have faith in him. I trust him,
Mm-hmm.
but I still got scared.
Yes.
And the doctor said, well, that doesn't mean that you have a tumor. It just might be a mass. We're going to look into it. So he sent me to another specialist, which was a fertility specialist. When I got to that particular doctor, once again, very knowledgeable doctor, very informed. He was a good bedside manner.
Mm-hmm.
He did a examination. He said, we're going to go in and we're going to have surgery. And so I had surgery, and I found out that I had a fibroid pressing down on my fallopian tube, which was roughly the size of a grapefruit.
Mm-hmm.
I did not know that. I had no idea that that was happening. I had no, how most women in that situation, they have bad cramps,
Yes.
heavy bleeding, all
Mm-hmm.
this stuff goes on. I didn't have any of that. I did have, some painful cramps once a month, but my bleeding wasn't anything that was totally out of control. So I'm thinking I'm just having cramps. That's it. So we go in, we have the surgery, fibroid is removed. They do a biopsy on it because that's mandatory,
Mm-hmm.
and find out that it is benign. I didn't have any kind of cancer. So I was like, thank you, God, covering me. I love you, Jesus. You're wonderful. But while the doctor was in there, he said, while I was there, I'm like, oh, goodness. He said, I noticed that you have a hernia. I'm like, oh, what?
Wow.
So he said, so to help you, if you were to get pregnant, that hernia is going to get larger and is going to probably cause you pain. So let's go and repair that. So 1 month after having fibroid surgery, having fibroid removal, I
Mm-hmm.
had hernia repair. So they went in and cut me open again, and they did the repair on the hernia. And so I'm thinking, yes, all is well. I'm good. Let's do this. 2 years later, nothing. I
Wow.
didn't know what was going on. And I know this may sound like this is long, and I do apologize. I'm trying to cut down as much as I can. But
That's why you're here. Thank you. This is why you're here to share. This is what your life was, and it's intense. That must have been very
Yeah, and
intense.
that was going through it. I'm like I say, I'm usually very optimistic, so I'm always looking for what's the lesson in this. So my lesson was patience. I'm like, let me learn. I'm learning patience. So after the hernia was repaired, at this point, we're at maybe year 5 or 6 of my marriage, still with no children. 5 or 6 years of trying. Eventually, my husband went in. The doctor told him that, he's looking good, because a lot of men, and I have to commend my husband for this, a lot of men, the first thing they do is, if you suggest it might be them, it's like something happens with their ego. It's like it shakes their ego up. It's like their manhood is questioned if they feel like they can't produce a child. But my husband, he's like, look, if it's me, I want to know, because I don't want you to go through all this pain and suffering and doubt, and I'm the cause. So he went in and got checked out, and turned out he was in good shape. So it wasn't necessarily him.
Yes.
That was the cause. So we were back to me. Okay, fibroids removed, hernias repaired. Let's keep going. So, well, no, let me back up. Hormones are balanced, fibroid removed, hernia repaired. Let's keep moving.
Okay.
6 years into the marriage, okay, it's like, okay, this is not working out. I don't understand what's happening. So I was referred to a fertility specialist that would do tests for me to find out what my status is. Because at this point, I'm technically infertile, because, like you said in your introduction, I have not bared any children after trying. And so technically I am infertile. Medically speaking, they didn't know why I was infertile. There was no answer to that. So I had to do some tests. I did 2 tests. One test was a test where they insert liquid, a saline solution, into your fallopian tubes to see if they are clear, if there's any blockage. And if it's clear, then the water kind of, goes through, and it's saline, so it really doesn't do any harm to you. They also did a test where they inserted dye to see how clear the passageway was for the tubes. A very uncomfortable test. I have to say, it was very uncomfortable, because they're shooting liquid into my tubes, and it's like I could feel all of that. So it was uncomfortable, but it was like patience, dealing with patience, because this is what we wanted. Could only do two of those tests, because my insurance, which is another thing that we run into, my insurance did not pay for any fertility procedures.
So it
They
was
would
all
only,
out of pocket.
well, no, at this point, they would only pay for tests. They would
I
test to see
see.
what's going on with you, but they would not pay for anything like IVF, stuff like that. They don't pay for it. So the doctor was like, okay, let's do a shot, because ovulation, your time of the month, we're gonna give you a shot, an injection, which is gonna go directly to the ovaries, and that's gonna stimulate them. And once you have intercourse, it should be, it should happen for you. Still nothing. And that shot I had to pay out of pocket, because it was a procedure, not a test. One shot was $84. Just one shot of, like, I want to say it was like 5 cc's. It wasn't even, it was like this much.
Even a full shot.
One shot. But I had to use it, because I'm trying to make something happen. Like I said, that was year 7. Still nothing. So at this time, my husband and I were like, look, if you can't be, if you're not going to get pregnant, that's okay. Let's just travel. Let's travel. Let's enjoy ourselves. Let's enjoy our marriage. And after that, we kind of just let it go. We didn't think none of it. We just let it go. And then in year 13 of the marriage, I just felt weird. I wasn't sick. I didn't, at that time, keep in mind, we weren't doing anything to make this happen, except for the one thing that you have to do. But we weren't taking any medicine. We weren't doing any, we were just, living life. And like I said, I got up, took the test, and voila, I was like maybe 2 or 3 weeks late with my cycle, and
Wow,
yeah, yeah.
that is amazing.
It's a
So,
long story.
so along your journey
Hmm.
with seeing medical professionals, did anyone actually ever tell you you were infertile, or they just kept treating you, trying to get you to a place where you could conceive?
They were trying to get me to a place where I could conceive. Like I said, technically I was infertile because of the fact that I it had been a number of years and I hadn't produced a child. So
Right.
by those means, it fell into that category. However, the big thing that they had, they couldn't, figure out was the fact that they didn't understand why I couldn't have a child. um,
Mm-hmm.
they would tell me, well, it looks like all indications are, you should be able to have a child. You have eggs, you have a healthy body, you have a healthy spouse,
Mm-hmm.
so there all the conditions were right. It was a perfect storm, but no rain came. So I was like, we were trying to figure out what was going on. So yeah, none of them really just said, you're not able to have it at all. They just couldn't understand why. They couldn't figure it out.
So you have eloquently shared the medical aspect of it.
Hmm.
What was the emotional, psychological, and the whole interpersonal relationship? Did you ever hit a rough patch where you were depressed, or did you get anxious constantly,
I I believe
anticipating?
I believe I went through all the emotions I had.
Mhm,
If I had them, I started off hopeful, prayerful. I remember, like I said, I'm constantly in church, constantly going to church services. I remember it was a couple of times where, one prophet I remember told me in year 3, by this time next year on Mother's Day, you'll have a child. And so, of course, I get
or
excited,
mhm, mhm,
and if I didn't have the faith that I had in God, and if I didn't have my own relationship with Him,
mhm,
hearing something like that and it not coming to pass would
mhm,
have definitely shaken my foundation.
mhm,
But since I did have a strong foundation, I had my own relationship with God. I knew what God had told me, and He did not tell me by next year I'll have a child. He
mhm,
just told me I was going to have one. He didn't
mhm,
tell me when. He just said I was going to have one.
mhm,
So for someone to put a timing on it, of course I was hopeful. I went through hope. I went through, questioning whether or not I should leave my husband because he was such he was at the time a school teacher. He's retired since then. He's going into pastoralship full time, but at the time he was a school teacher, and so all the kids loved him. And I'm like, okay, I'm robbing him of something that he
mhm,
wants now. And so I'm like, well, should I leave him and go, allow him to go somewhere and be happy, and I'll just deal with it. I went through that. Then I went through depression, where I would wake up and, or just not be able to go to sleep. And I would just sit in my living room by myself and try to cry quietly in a pillow because
mhm,
I don't want to wake him up because he's going to come in and, I don't
mhm.
want him to feel guilty.
Yeah.
And
Mhm,
so, and then I went through that, and then I went through, well, I'm gonna just celebrate with others that are having, because by this time, after so many years, my friends started having children.
mhm,
And then after that, my nephew started having children. And this is somebody I saw being birthed. So
mhm,
and I'm looking at him being born, and now he's having children. And then I
mhm,
went through, I just went through the whole gamut. And then if eventually I just celebrated the fact that I have children that, even though I didn't birth, they look at me for wisdom, they look at me for counsel, and I just started embracing them. I
mhm,
started loving on them, and just was happy with all my godchildren and my nieces and my nephews, and I found a happy place.
mhm,
And so I got to a point where it's like, God, is your will. I even went through, God, you told me this and you promised me this, because I heard clearly Him promising me a child, and I'm
mhm,
like, God, you promised me this, and I know that you're not a God that you would lie. So
mhm.
I'm not understanding you. I don't get you, God. And I did question him because that was the only way I was going to get answers. You know,
Right.
growing up, you hear all the time, you don't question God. But how else I'm gonna find out what he wants from me or what I'm doing, what how I'm gonna so I would ask him, God, what do you want from me? What I need to do? I even went through the time where I felt like I'm not a woman enough because I couldn't conceive a child. So I'm not really a woman. Stuff
Mhm.
like that goes through your mind. And if you allow it to eat at you, it can destroy your spirit. And so
Mhm.
I had to start channeling my energy toward, okay, I can't birth natural children. What can I birth? I write books. I started writing, I started getting back into writing plays and I
Mhm.
started acting. So I started putting my energy into other things instead of being obsessed with trying to conceive a child.
That's so good. Let's stay right there for a minute. You said you tried to birth other things. And I
Yes.
feel like, there's such a correlation between physical birth and spiritual birth. And
Right.
sometimes when we are physically barren,
Yeah.
it can cause us to be spiritually barren. Because as you said, it could cause depression and
Yes.
having issues with God about where are you and what do you want me to do? And I don't understand. And if you get stuck there, you can find that the spiritual aspects of your life are just as barren as the physical, natural side. So I think that it is so significant that you said you made a decision to start birthing other things.
Yeah.
In our conversation off air, you shared with me about how you began to, uh, because you got that word, that you
Mhm.
began to minister and do other things in your church. And you said at top of show, you do the women's ministry.
Yeah.
So, how has this testimony impacted that group in terms of how you do what you do?
It's interesting because a lot of the women at my church, um, they don't have too many issues. There are a few that do have issues, but they stay quiet. A lot of times they stay quiet. And
Mm-hmm.
so with me coming out and sharing what actually showing my faith through this, and persevering and determining that this is what God showed me, and I got to stay focused. It influenced a lot of women to, uh, I guess, speak up more about what's going on with them. And I
Mm-hmm.
found out that a lot of women too, not just at my church, but a lot of women suffer with fibroid situations, a
Mm-hmm.
lot of other reproductive things going on with their reproductive organs. And a lot of times we don't share that because we feel like, this is our private struggle. So we don't share that. And what we end up doing is when we don't share, we don't realize that there is other women that have gone through that and are willing to help you through. One thing that I will say that I never do this because I'm not a prophet per se, but if I'm in my prayer time or if I'm interceding, God will allow me to see things and share with others that might need to hear it. One
Mm-hmm.
thing I never say you need to get yourself together because that's why God hasn't given you a child.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm,
that can crush a person's spirit.
absolutely.
Um,
Absolutely.
because that has been said to me. Well, the reason why you haven't given birth physically is because you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing in God. And so what that causes is a kind of a panic where you start grabbing all kind of things and trying to do that
Mm-hmm.
you were not called to do
Mm-hmm.
because
Wow.
you're trying to
Mm-hmm.
fill in a blank.
Yes.
And you're looking for anything to do to make that happen because I got into that point where I'm doing things that I know that I was not called to do, but I'm trying to work in ministry because I'm like, I'm missing something. I'm not doing something. And I think I shared with you that earlier that it wasn't so much what I wasn't doing. It
Mm-hmm.
was just that God was still preparing me
Yes.
for the blessing. Um,
Yes.
And it wasn't that I was not coming to church enough. It wasn't that I wasn't praying hard enough. It wasn't that I wasn't loving God enough, or I didn't have enough faith. That wasn't the case. The
My,
thing
yeah.
was, I had to realize that I had to practice patience because He was working on me,
Mhm.
doing a work that I couldn't do for myself. He was
Yeah.
preparing my household. He was preparing my husband for, and I to be good parents. And that patience paid off
Yeah.
because when you have a child, it requires a lot of patience. When you have an active child, when your child is active, it requires even more patience.
Yes. Yeah.
And so by that time, my patience is really, it's strengthened. My faith is strengthened, and I stopped being so desperate just to try to feel a need of doing something in the ministry because, like I said, it's I had to listen to what God was saying. And a lot of us end up, and we talked about this at my church Sunday. One of the ministers said that sometimes we can cause people to have spiritual suicide.
Mm.
We tell them a word and
Mhm.
we send them out uh, on a calling that they're not built for, and they kill themselves spiritually. They
Mm.
wind up
Mm.
just hanging themselves spiritually because they are not. This is not what God called them to do, but because someone told them that this is what they should do, messed
That's
them up.
right.
So
Mhm.
yeah, I had to learn, and it also strengthened my spiritual walk with God. I learned His voice better as well.
Mhm.
I started getting a little more Holy Ghost smart, so to speak, because it's like I know my God's voice. What
Yeah.
you're saying is not quite what He has told me.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to be rude to you with your word. I'm just
Mhm.
going to say perhaps it's for someone else that is listening, because
Yeah.
that's not for me.
That's the truth. How and that segues perfectly into what I was about to ask you next, which was how were the people around you treating you? Because a lot of times, when people kind of get a little wind of, your business and what you're trying to do, like you said, like people say, well, you're not doing what you're supposed to do. Or they got all the, you should have a teaspoon of castor oil and throw some salt over you. I mean, people always got
Yes,
something to say, whether it is helpful or not. And so, powering through not only the physical things, the relational things, you have to get through the kinds of things that people are saying, and sometimes it can be helpful, sometimes it can be insensitive,
yeah.
and people don't always have good balance on how their words are affecting others. And when I look back over my life, I can think of things from childhood that
Mhm.
you catch me on a good day, it can still hurt.
Yes,
And I don't know where sticks and stones may break your bones, but names will never hurt came from. But
that's not true.
words, yeah, that's not true. Words actually do hurt.
Yes, man.
Um, so uh, you eventually got pregnant. It was a natural um, birth.
Mhm.
And so tell us about your daughter. Like, how old is she now? What's her name? What's
She
she up to?
She is. Well, I want to back up with the people situation. Um,
Yes.
I went through. I encountered different reactions from people. I had people that were understanding, the ones that never wanted to bring up, a child because they thought it was going to hurt my feelings. Then I had the ones that felt like if I totally got um, into what they were doing with their children, maybe it would make me feel better.
Mm.
And then I had some. This was the one that always would irritate the dog snot out of me. When I would gain a little weight, and people would say, "Are you pregnant?" And I'm like, "No, I'm not." And then they'll turn around and say, "Well, why aren't you pregnant? What's taking you so long?" Never. I mean, I'm giving everybody this advice for free. Never ask a person who is trying to conceive what is taking you so long.
Yes. So
That to me
good.
is one of the most insensitive things. Oh my gosh. That it because what it is you're hashing up stuff and feelings that they're, and it's like, yeah, what is taking me so long? And then you go back to what's wrong with me? So please, if someone is having a hard time conceiving, or they haven't had a child yet and they're far into their marriage, please do not say what's taking you so long. Y'all need to get on it, because that, I'm serious, that just like, that drives me crazy. But after, like I said, year 13, we end up conceiving. Right after our 14th anniversary, at the end of that month, which was February the 28th, 2017, my beautiful daughter Zayla was born. She's 5 years old now. She's very, very mature. And I always say that, I was, at the time when I had her, I was 43 years old. And it's funny because my mother had my baby sister at 43 years old. And I used to tease my mother because I was a senior in high school and I drove her to a doctor's appointments. And so the first time she found out she was pregnant, she came out with the ultrasound and I laughed because I was like, I'm just laughing at her. I'm gonna, you have a, because at the time she had my brother had a child. My brother was married and had a child. So I'm laughing at her. I'm like, you going around having children after your, child had a child? And I'm laughing. So God, in his infinite wisdom and his little sense of humor, him and his sense of humor, he got me back. And at 43, I had my child. And yeah, but when she came in, I mean, I always say, and I know I'm wrong for this, but I always say old people have old babies. My child acts like she is like grown, but not grown in like, not being mindful and all that. She's just very smart, very intuitive. And I know I'm bragging because it's my child, but she's very loved and very loving. And I was gonna bring her up here so you can meet her, but she ran back, to what she was doing. But she was up here trying to get on camera a while ago. But yeah, she's not shy at all. That's my little angel baby, and I just, that's my miracle. That's my promise, because God promised us her, and we had to be, ready for her. We really did, because like I said, she's a dynamo.
How is she with your husband? Is she a daddy's girl?
Oh my gosh, she is such a daddy's girl. Oh my goodness. And it's funny because when I was pregnant, my husband, and like I said, I can't credit him enough. He is the best father I've ever met, the best husband I could ever dream of. When I was pregnant, he told me in the first, like, when we first found out, first trimester, he said, we in this together. I'm not going to be a wimp behind her, because when he found out he wanted a boy. And the only reason he wanted a boy, he said, because he could be hard with a boy. He said, if I have a girl, I'm gonna be like butter. I'm gonna be on a milk. I'm gonna be putty in her hands. And I'm like, no, you gotta stay strong. And so every now and then we would look at each other. I'm like, look, dude, we gotta be on, one accord. We gotta work together on this thing. He said, okay, I'm working, I'm getting ready now. I'm training now to build up my muscle. I'm like, okay, I don't need you to be weak behind that little girl. Soon as she's born, in the hospital, they have you doing skin to skin. He was doing skin to skin more than I was. It's like when the baby is laid. Every time I looked up, I'm like, really, really? She had him wrapped like the first minute he saw her. It was over. And so that's his girl. Her daddy is a superhero. You know, we had a conversation on the way home today where she said her and her daddy are very, very smart. And I'm like, well, what about me? Am I smart? She's like, yeah, you smarter than our dog. So she said I'm smarter than a dog. She gave.
Wow.
So in the house, it's them two, it's me, and then it's the dog. So yeah, that's his girl. That's his heart. He'll admit it in a minute. That is his girl.
And what a blessing that he came full circle on not even wanting to have children to walking this journey with
Yeah.
you to now just being putty. You know, it's like, wow, what a
Yeah.
180-degree, you
And
know.
to be honest, he's the one that when I first had her, um, the first couple of months they were able to give him fraternity leave. So they were able to give him time off from his school to
Right.
spend with us. He took like a month off. I think they gave him like 3 weeks, and then he went to spring break. So in that time he got a chance to bond with us as well. And so when I went back to work, since he's a school teacher, um, during the summer, he was off. So he basically from the month after I went back to work when school was out, he was the one keeping her at, I want to say she was probably about 4 months by that time. He was keeping her, he was changing the diapers, he was making sure she was fed, he was doing all that. And so when it comes to taking care of her, I'm not the only one that can take care of her. I mean, he
Mhm.
can take care of her without missing a beat. Putting clothes on. The only thing he does not do, and he says this, he admits this wholeheartedly, he does not comb hair.
Mhm.
He will not comb her hair. So her godmother, who is a beautician, he told me when she was born, he was gonna get her to put braids in her hair. So she would I was like, no, sir, we can't do that. He said she can have some extensions. No, no, we can't do that. But yeah, he does not comb hair. So, but everything else, he's good with everything else. That's just the one thing.
That's so good. So, um, what words of encouragement do you have for anyone who is either potentially viewing or knows of someone who is struggling with fertility issues? What words of encouragement do you have for them?
Well, the first thing is build up your spiritual muscle, because there's going to be times when your faith is tested. There's going to be times where your prayer life needs to be on point. So all those things you need to kind of keep in mind before and then decide if you want to go through this challenging, difficult journey.
Mm,
Um,
mm,
know God's voice and know if He told you this is what He wants you to do. I believe I had mentioned adoption was talked about in with my husband and myself. We talked about it, but I know that the promise that God made me was I was going to
mm,
have a
mm,
child myself.
mhm,
Naturally, I was going
mm,
to have a child, and so I didn't feel like I needed to help God with that. However, there are others out there that their journey might take them to adoption.
mhm,
I know people that have adopted children and have been very fulfilled with that. And I don't think that I would not have been fulfilled if I would have adopted, but
mhm.
I would have still kind of felt that I wasn't listening to the God's
Yeah,
promise totally.
yeah.
And so adoption is always a really good option. If you can afford IVF, I don't frown on that. I couldn't afford it. I'll be
Mm,
honest with you.
mhm,
It takes about 3,000 a lot of times a session, or for each egg to be fertilized, and then they recommend at least doing 3 eggs.
mhm,
So that's $3,000 a pop. That's almost $9,000, and
mhm,
it's no guarantee that you'll get pregnant that way.
mm,
However, if you can afford it, you know, go for it. It's many different ways of doing things. There was even a way that another procedure that was talked about was called washing, where they would take the male's sperm, wash out any deformities or defects,
mm,
and the most fertile of the sperm they would use to fertilize you. They would inject that into directly into the uterus. So that's another option. So my other advice would be talk to your doctor, find out what your body is what's going on with your body. Make
mhm,
sure that you are healthy, because you might be trying to force something that is your body can't take. So find out what's going on with your body, find out with your health, what's happening. And like I said, just be prepared if you do decide, if this is what God is telling you, if God is saying that you are going to have a child, if he has spoken clearly to you on
Mhm.
what by what means and by what way that child is going to go, trust God on that. Believe him on that. That's why I say you got to build up your spiritual muscle. You have to have faith in this journey, because without faith, you're going to crumble. So you have to have faith. You got to have prayer. You got to know God, because that's going to be the one that's going to keep
Yeah,
you
yeah.
sane through all of this.
Hmm. That is so true. I know of, I'm a hairstylist by trade, and there are several clients that I know who want to have children, and they're not even in a relationship now. And, they're in their
Yeah.
40s. And so, now like you said, when you started, you were hopeful. But now I'm starting to see their resolve kind of waver,
Yes.
because it's like I'm not even in a relationship where the possibility is there. So I got to get the relationship first. And
Right.
so, but I love what you said about, if you've got if you've got a word from God, that's money in the bank. We can't back up off of what we know he has said, but you do need to be certain that that's what he said.
That's what he
You
said.
know,
Exactly.
yeah, because sometimes we can get passionate about something, but just because
Yeah.
we're passionate doesn't mean that that's the Holy Spirit. And so we
Exactly.
do have to have clear understanding of did the word come from God, or did we tell him that's what we wanted and just and we're just believing that.
We
Um,
call it a permissive will,
how about
where
that?
it's God's will and then it's permissive will, where you say to yourself, God, you keep begging God for something over and over again. And that's not what he said, but you keep begging, and eventually he's like, okay, go ahead. But it's not going to work out the way he would want it to work out, because that's not what he had for you in mind.
Right.
It's just it's certain things that we have to consider.
Hmm. So, you were saying that your daughter is 5 and you had
Yes,
her when you were 43, you said?
yes, ma'am.
So what is it like, being in your late 40s, approaching 50 and raising like a little one like that? Are you sleeping okay? Is your energy good? Is God keeping you?
I do take vitamins. I really, really do take vitamins. But the thing is, that's why I know God, this is what God wanted, because he preserved me this whole time. Because not that
Amen.
I'm not bragging on myself, but
Hmm.
when I tell people that I'm 48, the first thing they're like, no, you're not. I'm like, yes, I am. So the
Hmm.
first thing God did is he preserved me.
Hmm.
On the realistic, on the flip side of that, now that's the spiritual side. He preserved me. He gave me some energy, but
Hmm.
I will admit there's some times where the little girl, it's just like I said, she's high, she's very active, she's high octane. And so a
Hmm.
lot of times that's when my husband kind of like comes in to the rescue, because he's high energy too. So those two, I'm like, y'all have at it, have fun. But yeah, it takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of work, because sometimes and I work, full time. So when I
Hmm.
come home from work, she wants to play. LOL dolls are her thing right now. She wants to play that. She has a scooter. She wants to ride the scooter everywhere. She wants, she wants to do things with me, and so I have to figure out, do I take a nap, or do I get up here and play with her? So I try to have a balance. Where sometimes, like, baby, I'm tired. Please let me have a nap, and then we can play. And so I try to switch it up. It is tiring. I kid you
Yeah.
not. The hardest thing was when she was still trying to go through the milk, and not sleeping through the night. So the
Hmm.
first maybe 6 months to me were the hardest.
Hmm.
I was like delirious with sleep, but that's any mother,
Yes.
any new mother is going to go through that. Yeah.
Hmm.
So now she's more independent.
Hmm.
She's finishing up pre-K this week. This is the last week of school. She's getting
Oh,
ready to go into kindergarten,
yeah.
and so she's more independent. She's learning how to read. She's learning, she's doing more stuff herself. Like right now, she's been downstairs by herself playing. I don't know how the living room is gonna look, but it's okay. But she's really a sweet child, and she has great manners. But she does take a little work sometimes. She is high octane,
When I
really.
was doing research for the show, I read an article that was talking about the increasing number of couples that were waiting until their late 30s and 40s to have children.
Yeah,
And some of the reasons that they cited that I thought were so interesting was one, they talked about how at that age you just know yourself better, so you're calmer, you're not sweating the small stuff. And then the number one reason was to be more financially stable, that you don't have some of the
yeah,
anxiety that younger couples do in terms of how you're going to provide, and where's the next meal going to come from, because the longer you wait you tend to be more established. So I thought that that was so good. I know for myself, my mother was
right.
38 years old when she had me, and my dad had like some type of ailment that gave him a fever, and he thought he was sterile. So there's 9 years between myself and my next sibling. And so they thought
Hmm.
they couldn't have children for a long time
Right.
either. And so I was I still got it, baby. So when I showed up, it was like, oh wow, this is great. So I was a huge daddy's girl, and when I was a kid, I would photobomb all the pictures of my mom. You'd see me in the background, peace signing and everything. And I thought I was going to marry my dad. And I would tell my mom, when I grow up, can you come and live with dad and I when I get married to him? And you could be our maid. And she'd be like, your maid? I'm like, oh, he likes your cooking. And I was devastated when I realized you can't marry, your dad. I was like, oh boy, this is terrible. So I just thank you so much for sharing your journey.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. Because my daughter has asked that. Yeah,
she's
she's
asked you
asked that
that
of my husband
too.
for it. Yeah. No problem.
I
Can I share
definitely,
my scripture that I live?
yes,
Yes,
please.
she has. Uh, one the scripture that I kept in my mind throughout this whole time was Second Corinthians and 1. It says, "For all the promises of God in Him are yea, and in Him amen, until
Amen.
the glory of God by us."
Yes.
That's
Amen.
what kind of kept me going.
Amen.
Because He promised it to me, and it was going to be yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the scripture that came to me is all throughout your sharing was, as long as the earth remains, seed
Mhm.
time and harvest, and you persevered through the process, and you reaped a beautiful, baby girl. And
Yeah.
so our time is up, but I just want to thank you so much for taking the time to share with our viewers your journey. God bless you and your family. And I look forward to hearing amazing things. He didn't wait that long to bring her on the scene for her to be a regular kid. So I'm waiting to hear some amazing things about baby girl. And until next time, God bless you. Well, that's another segment for us of Let's Talk. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. And next week, we'll be back finishing up the Journey series. We hope that you're enjoying it. I love hearing people's testimony and their stories about overcoming and all of the things that it took for them to persevere and navigate through life. And until the next time, God bless you. God keep you in his care. Good night.